So long as Meleagros, Philos to Ares, was fighting in the war, things went badly for the kholos of the city of Pleuron, and they could not put up a resistance against the Aetolians outside the city walls of Pleuron, even though they, the kholos, had a multitude of fighters. Meleagros was angry, ho-omenos, in his heart, at his dear mother Althea, and he was lying around next to his wife, whom he had courted and married in the proper way. She was the beautiful Kleopatra, whose mother was Marpessa, the one with the beautiful ankles, daughter of Ainos, and whose father was Ides, a man most powerful among those earthbound men who lived in those times. She, Cleopatra, had been given a special name by the father and by the queen mother back then, when she was still growing up in the palace. They called her Alkyone, making that a second name for her because her mother, Marpessa, was feeling the same pain, oitos, felt by the halcyon bird, known for her many sorrows, penthos. So right next to her, Cleopatra, Meleagros lay down nursing his anger, kholos, an anger that brings pains, algaia, to the heart. He was angry about the curses, arai, that had been made by his own mother. And she was heard by a fury, ainos, that roams in the mist. A fury heard her from down below in Erebos, with a heart that cannot be assuaged. And then it was that the din of battle rose up all around the gates of the people of Caledon, and also the dull thump of the battering against their walls. They told him that wherever the most fertile plain in the whole region of lovely Caledon may be, at that place he could choose a most beautiful precinct of land, 50 acres, half of which would be a vineyard, while the other half would be a field open for plowing. He was also supplicated many times by the old charioteer Ainos, who was standing at the threshold of the chamber with the high ceiling and beating at the locked double door, hoping to supplicate him by touching his knees. Many times did his sisters and his mother, the queen, supplicate him, and all the more did he say no. Many times did his comrades, hetairoi, supplicate him, those who were most cherished by him and most near and dear of them all. But try as they might, they could not persuade the heart in his chest. Not until the moment when his chamber got a direct hit and the walls of the high fortifications were getting scaled by the kholos, who were starting to set fire to the great city of Caledon.
They killed the men. Fire turns the city to ashes.
His heart was stirred when he heard what bad things will happen. He got up and went off. Then he covered his body with shining armor, and this is how, hutos, he rescued the Aetolians from the evil day of destruction. This is a very hard thing to read, and there's so many details, And in many ways, it replicates the experience we have when we first start reading epic in translation. You have all of these details coming at you, and you're trying to sort it out. What does this all mean? There's so many names, so many references to things we don't know, to protagonists that we can't relate to because we don't know their stories. So this is a very tough passage for us to grapple with. For an ancient audience, especially Achilles and the other people in the shelter who are listening to this story, as told by Phoenix, it's another matter. Every detail is part of an epic tradition that people know of already. So you can even compress what could be as long as the Iliad into something as short as relatively short as this passage. And Phoenix had said that at the beginning. I'm going to tell you this story because it'll teach you something. And I'm going to tell this particular group, with you, Achilles, chief among them, because this will apply to you. And you are a philos, you're near and dear to me. Somehow that will matter. That is some story, and it just overwhelms me every time because there's so much packed into it.
So how would someone start? Where would you start with this passage?
I think, especially as a first reader, I would say, who are the main characters involved? It's almost like watching a Kurosawa film where if you don't know the culture of samurai films, you have a very hard time, especially when you get into a story. Well, who's important and who's not important? So maybe I think I would look for the characters who are most important to Meleagro, and they're actually lined up in a very neat way for us here. Anthropologists call this kind of lineup an ascending scale of affection. An ascending scale of affection is where people who are more and more and more near and dear to you are arranged in the story to come closer and closer and closer to the punchline and to you. And so I'd say, well, we start with the elders, and then we go to the priests, and then let's see if I can remember. You go to the sisters, then the mother. The father comes in between. So even though I've lived this story so many times, I can scramble what the ascending scale of affection is. But as things progress, things heat up emotionally, and so let's do that part again. You have the elders, the priests, the father, sisters, mother, and then finally you have the comrades, and now it's really heating up. And you think, well, this must be the takeaway. That seems to be what Phoenix wants to tell in his story, is that the comrades, the hetairoi, are the nearest and dearest to Meleagro, and so there they are lined up as close as possible to the punchline. But then it's almost as if the story just runs off the tracks. It gets hijacked by what? Well, if we call this the micronarrative, you could say that the hijacking is done by the macronarrative. In a sense, Phoenix fails to tell the story he wanted to tell because, whoops, actually there's somebody who is even more near and dear. The logic of the story says, well, actually there's somebody else, and that's the wife.
Even dear, more dear.
And the wife is even more near and dear.
Yes.
And Phoenix's narrative doesn't say that, but the logic of the narrative, the logic of the ascending scale of affection, is still saying it. But how did she come out of nowhere? Well, the thalamos, or the bedroom, got a direct hit as the enemy are bombarding the palace where Meleagro is sitting it out. Yep. And then what does she start to do? Cleopatra starts supplicating him and saying, think of all the terrible things that will happen to this city if it's destroyed. And so for all intents and purposes, she is singing a lament. And the lament is not for an individual person who is lost to his or her dear ones. It's the lament for a whole community. It's where a whole community suffers a holocaust. And that's what finally gets to Meleager. And then first he gets really sad, and then he gets really angry. It's the same kind of metastasis from sadness to anger that we saw Achilles experience when Agamemnon first insulted him. First he gets very, very sad. Then he gets super angry. The sadness metastasizes into anger. That's what happens here. So there's a lot that applies here to Achilles because Achilles too got sad and then got angry. But how it all shakes out, we don't know yet. And we'll have to wait till part 2.